Welcome to New Realities. I'm Alan Steinfeld. I'm back today with one of my favorite guests, Deepak Chopra, and we've been discussing this idea of enlightenment. And Deepak's been really on a lifelong search for what is enlightenment. Deepak, I'd love to hear some of your results in finding, this search, because that's what the spiritual path is. It's about awakening.
Well, the spiritual search always arises as a result of asking why is there suffering, okay? Because that's a fact of life, right? Buddha's search started with that, as in
Well, he said attachment is the source of this human vehicle to want to belong.
Buddha's philosophy derived from Vedanta originally, and the causes of human suffering are said to be 5. Not knowing your true identity, number 1. Number 2, attachment to that which is impermanent. In other words, trying to fix the flux. You can't do it. Number 3, being afraid of that which is impermanent, including your own body-mind. Number 4, identifying with your ego. And number 5, the fear of death. First, he modified it to the 4 noble truths. These were the 5 kleshas.
Right.
And then he said the Eightfold Path to Enlightenment, which is also modified, in a sense, from the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. So, what we are told by the great seers of all time is that these 5 causes of human suffering are contained in the first one, not knowing your true identity. You confuse yourself with this skin-encapsulated ego or this body-mind, which is of course constantly transforming. You don't have the same body that you had when you were a kid, or a child or a teenager. Don't have the same mind, don't have the same emotions.
But something remains the same.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's that part that's beyond impermanence. That is the permanence.
Yeah, I was talking to a quantum physicist recently. I said, try and explain to me the fundamentals, basic fundamentals, because a lot of people don't understand the math or the science or all this talk about wave, particle, etc. He said in one sentence, there are no boundaries to anything. There are no boundaries to this object, even though I like it. Okay, there are no boundaries to this. At the most fundamental level, everything which we call a boundary is a perceptual thing in human consciousness, not the reality. Or it's a notational thing, how we measure are snapshots of perception. Okay, but at the most fundamental level, there's no boundaries. So imagine I asked him to give me an analogy, which is very close to the Vedantic analogy, or the Buddhist. It says, if you look at the ocean and you see the waves coming and going, every wave is water before it arises. It's water when it's a wave, and it's water when it subsides. Or if you have a bubbling cauldron of water, then the bubbles are coming up and down. Well, but each of those bubbles that bubbles forth and bubbles back into the water, the bubbling water, has the same identity. It's water. Okay, so the I in me is the I in you. It's the I in this, and it's the I in the universe. It's the conscious universe that is bubbling forth as you and me.
But that's a kind of intellectual concept, and I appreciate that. How close do we have become to transcending the culturally imposed identities? How close have you gotten to actually
Well, see, there's waking, dreaming, and sleeping, and then there's something called soul consciousness, where you become aware of the observer in the midst of the observation. And you can do that any time. You're observing something and says, who's watching? Who's listening? And then you turn inwards. That's called soul consciousness. If you pay attention to it, it becomes more permanent, and it starts to be there in waking, dreaming, and sleeping. It's called cosmic consciousness, to be in the world and not of it. I'm connected to the source, and I'm here as well.
You feel that. You feel your connection.
Of
Because
course.
you're so busy. You're traveling the world, and
Of course.
No, okay.
And then there's God consciousness after cosmic consciousness, where you are aware of the spirit, the objects of your perception. Not only in Alan Steinfeld, but in this candle, in this rose, you see that God is not difficult to find, God is impossible to avoid. And finally, there's unity consciousness, where the observer here, the observer there, and the consciousness there all become one, and there's only one observer, and the whole universe is the manifestation of the observer. It's described beautifully in the Bhagavad Gita in chapters 9, 10, 11, 12, so on, the cosmic vision, But it's an experience we all need to have, because if we do, we find our true identity, where there's no fear of death, where there's infinite creativity, there's infinite love, there's peace, there's the peace that passes understanding, there's compassion, there's empathy, and there's joy, which is our fundamental state, which is beyond fear.
People where that moment has clicked for them.
Throughout history.
Throughout. And was there a moment for you where you were, a medical student, and then you were this, and you were Deepak, and then suddenly you realized you are everything?
Hey, listen, Alan. First of all, I don't like to talk about myself, but there's a saying, it takes a long time for a fruit to ripen, but one day it falls. So, yeah.
No, but usually just in people, it's like, okay, I get it. Not about yourself, but about the passage. Like Eckhart Tolle talks about sleeping on a park bench, and boom. Or Byron Katie was in...
yeah, I've had several of those moments.
And what was the difference between that moment, because you always had it intellectually, knowing before, and then suddenly being consciousness?
Yeah, well, everything's okay. That's all. I'm not a dramatic kind of person. So even when I wrote the biography of the Buddha, in the chapter Enlightenment is not dramatic. It's, it's easy. It's what we should be all the time.
Let me just ask you, is it sense that everyone is actually awake all the time when they forget the ego identity?
No, it's just that if your mind is constantly on the future and the past, then you live in a dream. The whole life is a dream, because your mind is either in the future and the past, which is what's happening in the dream, right? But if you can switch to the present moment and recognize it's the moment that never ends, and you stay grounded in that moment, you'll find your connection to the world of infinite correlation, infinite creativity, infinite love, infinite joy, and existence.
And this is what our society has to do. This is how we have to live have to, but thank you for your time
today. Thank you so much.
We'll continue this conversation.
Yeah, we'll do this.
Deepak's next book coming out is Brotherhood, about the childhood adventures of you and your brother.
Yeah, my brother is now a professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School. He's also the dean for medical education at Harvard Medical School. And I went a different way, but it's the story of love that maintains itself even though we're doing completely different things.
And thank you for being a spokesperson for this transcendence that is happening in our culture today.
Thank you, Alan.
Thanks,
Thank
Deepak.
you.